You have just signed the papers. $250,000 has left your bank account. Another million has arrived from a lender. The keys are now in your hand, the price board is glowing above the highway, and beneath your shoes sit thousands of gallons of gasoline sealed inside underground tanks. From the road, it looks as though you bought a fuel business. Financially, you bought something stranger. You bought a low-margin commodity outlet attached to a higher-margin convenience store, sitting on a regulated piece of real estate, financed with debt that must be paid whether customers stop or keep driving. Nearly $5 million may pass through this property over the next 12 months. Very little of it will automatically belong to you. That is the contradiction at the center of a gas station. The sales numbers can look enormous. The owner's cash can look ordinary. So what actually happens after you buy one? We are going to follow your money from the down payment to the first tanker delivery, through the pumps, across the store counter, into payroll, card fees, repairs, loan payments, and finally back to you. The numbers will use recent American industry benchmarks, but the station itself will be a realistic financial simulation, not a promise that every location performs the same way. Our example costs $1.25 million. You invest $250,000 as equity and borrow $1 million. But before this is over, you will discover that the purchase price was only the first number capable of hurting you. Subscribe to Blueprint Economics if you enjoy seeing what businesses look like after the impressive revenue figure is stripped away. Because by the end, you will know whether you bought an investment, purchased yourself a demanding job, or signed up to manage an environmental liability with a coffee machine attached. The first surprise arrives before closing. Buying a gas station can mean buying only the operating company while renting the land, purchasing the store and equipment under somebody else's fuel brand, or acquiring the entire property, land, building, tanks, pumps, and business. Those differences are not cosmetic. They determine what your money can become. A leasehold station may be cheaper because you are buying cash flow rather than land, but the lease is a clock. If only 8 years remain and rent can jump at renewal, resale value may shrink before the business stops making money. Owning the land changes the equation. A growing roadside parcel may eventually be worth more than the fuel operation, but property ownership demands more capital and exposes you directly to whatever happened beneath the soil. For our simulation, your $1.25 million buys the operating business and the real estate. That includes the store, canopy, pumps, payment terminals, refrigeration, shelving, signs, and underground storage system. It does not mean every dollar of the price went into physical assets. That is why the seller's financial statements matter more than the asking price. Before closing, you do not simply ask how much revenue the station generated. You reconstruct how the money moved. You collect 3 years of tax returns, bank deposits, fuel invoices, gallon reports, point-of-sale records, payroll filings, and repair logs. You compare fuel purchased with fuel sold, and store sales with deposits. Sudden improvements just before listing deserve suspicion. Then you confront one of the most abused numbers in small business sales: seller's discretionary earnings. This figure often starts with reported profit, then adds back the owner's salary, interest, taxes, depreciation, and selected personal or one-time expenses. It attempts to show the total economic benefit available to one working owner. Useful? Yes. The same as passive profit? Absolutely not. Suppose the seller says the station produces $210,000 in annual owner benefit. That sounds like a remarkable return. But the seller works 60 hours a week, covers overnight call-outs, negotiates with vendors, manages schedules, and personally handles bookkeeping. Replacing that labor with a manager and part-time administrative support might cost $80,000 a year. The station did not produce $210,000 for an absent investor. It produced perhaps $130,000 for the capital, while paying the owner the equivalent of a demanding management salary. You also adjust for deferred costs. A leaking roof, tired refrigeration, or obsolete payment terminals are future cash outflows disguised as historical profit. Then you inspect the fuel supply agreement. A major brand can bring trust and reliable supply, but also pricing formulas, minimum purchases, and renovation requirements. Strong sales can be weakened by a bad contract. Only after the earnings survive this reconstruction do you finance the deal. You bring $250,000. The lender brings $1 million. For illustration, assume the loan carries a 10% interest rate and amortizes over 25 years. Your payment is roughly $9,100 a month, or about $109,000 a year. That payment does not care whether fuel margins are strong. It does not become sympathetic when a refrigerator fails. It arrives every month. This is where leverage changes the personality of the investment. Without debt, a weak month is disappointing. With debt, a weak month can threaten the entire capital structure. Lenders often look at debt service coverage. The idea is simple. How much operating cash is available compared with the amount required for loan payments? If the station produces $150,000 before debt and owes $109,000, the coverage ratio is about 1.38. There is some protection, but not much. If operating cash flow falls by $30,000, coverage drops close to 1.10. The business may still make its payments, but almost every spare dollar has disappeared. At that point, a major repair is not an inconvenience. It is a financing event. Government-backed small business loans can finance acquisitions, working capital, and real estate. They do not make a bad station safe. Longer terms lower the payment but keep debt attached for years. Lower equity preserves cash but gives the lender a larger claim on future earnings. And you need that preserved cash immediately. The $250,000 down payment is not your total investment. You still need fuel in the tanks, merchandise on the shelves, payroll money, insurance, legal and accounting fees, utility deposits, permit transfers, cash for the registers, and a reserve for the first machine that breaks after the seller stops answering your calls. Assume those items require another $150,000. Your real cash commitment is now approximately $400,000. Working capital keeps the station moving because inventory must be purchased before customers pay for it. Imagine an 8,000-gallon delivery costing $2.70 per gallon. That is $21,600 tied up in one tanker load before considering other delivery charges. If wholesale prices jump, the next load may require thousands more, even if your sales volume has not changed. This is the first lesson of ownership. Liquidity is oxygen. A station can appear profitable on paper and still suffocate because too much cash is trapped in inventory, repairs, or loan payments. Then the first full month begins. Your station sells 100,000 gallons. At an average pump price of $3.12, fuel revenue reaches $312,000 for the month, or roughly $3.74 million at the same pace for a full year. That number looks magnificent on a sales report. Now remove the illusion. The recent national gross markup on gasoline has been close to 40 cents per gallon. At 100,000 gallons, that would create about $39,700 of monthly gross fuel margin before the direct costs of selling it, before expenses. Those two words do a remarkable amount of work. Card fees, delivery, equipment, maintenance, losses, and other direct selling costs can consume roughly 20 to 25 cents per gallon. Using the middle of that range, perhaps $22,500 disappears from the $39,700 gross margin. Your $312,000 in monthly fuel sales may leave approximately $17,200 as fuel contribution before the wider expenses of operating the property. The customer sees a 15-gallon purchase worth nearly $47. You may retain less than $6 in gross markup and perhaps only $2 or $3 after the direct costs attached to that fuel sale. The rest flows backward through the supply chain or sideways into taxes, card networks, transportation, and operating systems. High revenue is not the same thing as a high-margin business. A gas station resembles a wide river running through a narrow turbine. The volume is impressive. The amount converted into usable power is much smaller. Pricing makes the turbine unstable. Customers see competing prices from the road and may switch stations over a few cents. If your wholesale cost rises 5 cents tonight while the station across the intersection delays its increase, matching that price may preserve traffic while sacrificing your margin. You also price around replacement cost, what the next delivery will cost. Selling today's inventory too cheaply can leave you short of cash when tomorrow's tanker arrives. So pump prices can rise while the owner's economics worsen. Replacement fuel costs more, card fees increase with the transaction, and customers have less money left for the store. Yet fuel is still indispensable because it delivers traffic. The pump is the billboard, the parking lot, and the customer acquisition system. The store is where the economics become interesting. Assume your convenience store generates $100,000 in monthly sales, or $1.2 million a year. At an illustrative gross margin of 34%, it produces approximately $408,000 in annual gross profit. Compare that with the fuel side. Using our midpoint assumptions, 1.2 million gallons might contribute around $206,000 after direct fuel selling expenses. The smaller revenue stream can produce almost twice the contribution. That is the central trick of the gas station model. Gasoline gets the driver to stop. Coffee, prepared food, packaged drinks, snacks, and impulse purchases determine whether the stop was financially worthwhile. A gallon of fuel is difficult to differentiate. The gasoline at one compliant station performs much like the gasoline at another. But a clean store, fast service, fresh food, and a good coffee program can change where customers stop and how much they spend once they enter. Prepared food can be powerful because the station competes for breakfast, lunch, and late-night demand. Its margins may be attractive, but food adds labor, waste, safety requirements, and equipment costs. The most valuable metric may not be gallons sold, it may be conversion, the percentage of fuel customers who walk inside. Suppose better lighting, cleaner bathrooms, faster checkout, and stronger food displays produce 1,000 additional store visits each month. At a $7 average basket, that is $7,000 in additional monthly sales. At a 34% gross margin, the change adds roughly $2,380 in monthly gross profit. To create the same gross contribution from fuel at 15 cents per gallon after direct selling costs, you would need nearly 15,900 additional gallons. 1,000 small shopping decisions can be worth more than a convoy of extra fuel customers. That is the revelation most people miss. A gas station is not mainly trying to make you buy more gasoline. Your vehicle determines how many gallons you need. The station is trying to make your 5-minute stop produce a second transaction. If that changed how you see the pumps outside every convenience store, subscribe to my YouTube channel now. The visible product often attracts the customer, while a quieter product pays the bills. That pattern appears across airports, stadiums, hotels, and dozens of businesses we investigate here. The store may also earn from tobacco, alcohol where permitted, lottery, ATMs, car washes, and branded food counters. But sales quality varies. Lottery can create traffic with little profit. A car wash can produce strong contribution, but requires capital and constant maintenance. Now the gross profit meets the expense ledger. Using our example, fuel contribution is approximately $206,000 a year. Store gross profit is about $408,000. Together, they create roughly $614,000 before the broader operating costs. Payroll takes the first large bite. A station open long hours needs cashiers, cleaners, food preparation, supervisors, and backup coverage. Our model assigns $230,000 to wages, payroll taxes, and benefits. Utilities take refrigerators, exterior lights, HVAC, pumps, signs, kitchen equipment, and security systems operate for long hours. Insurance and property costs take $55,000. Repairs take $35,000. Shrinkage, spoilage, and shortages consume $30,000. Administration takes $30,000, and other operating costs take $35,000. The figures vary by location, but the mechanism does not. Dozens of ordinary expenses each remove a thin layer from the same limited pool of gross profit. After approximately $460,000 in operating overhead, the station produces around $154,000 before debt. Now the bank collects $109,000. You reserve $20,000 for capital expenditure because pumps, refrigeration, roofs, and parking lots do not last forever. Approximately $25,000 remains before income tax. Remember the nearly $4.94 million in annual revenue? This is what survives. If you work full-time in the station and the payroll budget includes a $60,000 salary for your management labor, your total personal economic benefit may be about $85,000, $60,000 for doing the job, and $25,000 as return on the money you invested. Those are not the same kind of income. Your salary compensates you for time, stress, and responsibility. The $25,000 is the investment return remaining after the business pays for management. On $400,000 of initial cash, that is a cash-on-cash return of roughly 6.25% before tax. You are also repaying loan principal, which gradually increases your equity in the property. That matters. But principal repayment is not cash you can use to cover a broken compressor next Tuesday. Now change one assumption. Reduce the fuel contribution by 5 cents per gallon. Across 1.2 million gallons, annual cash flow falls by $60,000. Your $25,000 distribution disappears. The capital reserve disappears. The remaining pressure begins moving toward your salary or your savings, or reduce inside sales by 10%. At a 34% gross margin, annual gross profit falls by roughly $40,800. Or increase payroll by $30,000 because the station requires more coverage than the seller claimed. The base case has little room to absorb any of these changes. Your approximate contribution break-even is $589,000. $460,000 for operating expenses, $109,000 for debt, and $20,000 for capital reserves. The station currently produces $614,000. This is why a few cents matter. The business handles millions because the products moving through it are expensive. It does not keep millions because the margins and obligations are tightly stacked. Then comes the risk that cannot be found by staring at the cash register. Underground tanks must be protected against leaks, corrosion, spills, and overfills. Owners have reporting, monitoring, maintenance, and financial responsibility obligations. State requirements can go beyond federal rules. If fuel has escaped into the soil or groundwater, the cleanup can follow the property rather than the person who caused the original problem. Insurance, state cleanup funds, and contractual protections may help, but none should replace environmental investigation before purchase. That means reviewing tank age, construction, monitoring records, inspection history, prior releases, and closure documents. A Phase 1 environmental assessment searches records and site history for warning signs. If the evidence suggests contamination, physical testing may follow. The most expensive inventory in the business may be the gasoline that is no longer inside the tank. The future adds another pressure. American gasoline demand does not need to collapse for stations to feel pain. If vehicles become more efficient, the same number of drivers can travel farther while purchasing fewer gallons. Energy forecasts for 2026 and 2027 point toward declining gasoline consumption as fleet efficiency improves and driving growth slows. Electric charging offers a possible adaptation, but it is not a free replacement. Fast charging hardware and installation can cost tens of thousands of dollars per connector, sometimes much more when utility upgrades, trenching, and electrical capacity are required. Demand charges can make the power expensive. Utilization may be weak during the early years, but charging changes the customer's time on site. A gasoline customer may leave in 5 minutes. A charging customer may remain long enough to buy a meal, work, shop, or return repeatedly to a location with clean facilities. The station of the future may earn less by moving energy quickly and more by monetizing the customer's wait. Now let us run the actual blueprint across 3 ownership levels. These are illustrative scenarios, not guaranteed returns. First, the small independent station. You buy the operating business but lease the property. The business costs $450,000, and inventory, fees, and reserves raise total project capital to about $550,000. You invest $180,000 and finance $370,000. The station generates roughly $3 million in annual revenue and about $115,000 before debt and owner compensation. You pay yourself a $50,000 working salary. Debt service consumes roughly $45,000 to $50,000, and capital reserves take another $10,000. Perhaps $5,000 to $10,000 remains as distributable cash. Total personal benefit may approach $60,000 because you created a job for yourself, but the pure capital return is weak and there is no property appreciation. Distributions alone may take more than 15 years to repay your invested cash. This model suits a hands-on operator far better than a passive investor. Second, the established regional operation. Now imagine buying 5 profitable locations with shared management and a mix of owned and leased real estate. The portfolio costs $6.5 million, plus $700,000 for inventory, fees, and working capital. Investors contribute $2.2 million. Debt supplies $5 million. Combined revenue reaches about $25 million. Shared purchasing, accounting, and management create efficiencies, producing roughly $1.15 million before debt, taxes, and major capital spending. Debt service absorbs about $600,000. Maintenance and renovation reserves take $200,000. Around $300,000 remains before tax. That is a 13 to 14% cash return on equity in a stable year, plus principal repayment. But you now own 5 roofs, 5 labor problems, and several underground fuel systems. Scale removes some costs and multiplies the places where surprises can occur. Payback might take 7 to 9 years if results remain stable and cash is distributed. Third, the institutional platform. Imagine a 20-store portfolio generating $100 million in annual revenue and $4.5 million before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. At 7 times that figure, the platform costs $31.5 million. Working capital and transaction expenses raise total capital to about $33.5 million. Investors contribute $12 million. Debt supplies $21.5 million. The larger operator negotiates better merchandise pricing, spreads technology and administration across more stores, centralizes food production, and uses data to manage inventory and pricing. Debt service may approach $2.5 million, and recurring capital expenditure $800,000. Leaving roughly $1.2 million before tax, about a 10% cash return on initial equity, plus principal repayment. Institutional investors may improve earnings, acquire more sites, and eventually sell the larger platform. Their return depends on operating cash flow, debt, growth, and the resale multiple, not merely on gallons sold. Scale cannot rescue an overpriced acquisition. It can make the mistake larger. So, what happens when you buy a gas station? You do not simply purchase pumps and begin collecting the difference between wholesale and retail gasoline. You commit equity, borrow against future cash flow, and purchase inventory before selling it. You compete on a price visible from the road, then use a thin margin commodity to attract customers toward higher margin food and merchandise. You manage payroll, theft, spoilage, card fees, utilities, repairs, regulation, and debt. Beneath it all sits an underground system capable of changing the property's value. Successful owners buy at a sensible multiple, secure control of the property, protect fuel volume without destroying margin, convert drivers into store customers, preserve working capital, and investigate the ground before trusting the building above it. The risk sits with you. Suppliers are paid. Employees expect wages. Card networks take fees. The lender receives monthly payments. Customers can leave over 5 cents. Your return is whatever remains. The assumption that matters most is not the pump price. It is contribution, the gross profit each gallon and store visit creates after direct costs. A quieter station with stronger contribution, safe tanks, durable property rights, and manageable debt may be worth more than a busier station with weak margins and hidden liabilities. From the highway, a gas station looks like an energy business. From the financial statements, it is a retail conversion machine built on leveraged real estate. And from the owner's bank account, it is a test of whether millions of dollars in sales can be disciplined into a few durable dollars of free cash flow. That is the part outsiders rarely see. Subscribe to Blueprint Economics for the next investigation, where we will take another familiar asset, follow every dollar through it, and find out whether the visible business is the one actually producing the return. Because at a gas station, the fuel brings the customer. The store creates the margin, the land builds the wealth, and the tanks hold the risk.